Welcome, folks, to That Reminds Me Of. This episode, we are talking about, what's it called, Baron?
I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Charlie Kaufman. Hard title to remember. And can I just say early on, this episode, like all of them, is going to be spoiler heavy, but I feel like in particular we need to say it for this film because it is a film that is hard to talk about without getting deep into spoilers. So go see it if you haven't already, or if you're okay to have the film a little bit spoiled, then listen on and then watch it. That's fine too.
Yeah, this is impossible to talk about without spoiling because the spoils are the movie.
That's the juicy parts. That's the whole. That's what it's all about.
How are you, Baron?
I'm doing good. I'm doing great. I've been enjoying the films that we've been watching since the Melbourne International Film Festival. We've had a real ride. We've had Terminator, Mulan, and now we've got a Kaufman film. How exciting.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I feel like this one is more in my general lane. So
I thought so.
I'm looking forward to this so much.
You know what? The second the film started, I turned to Edie and was like, this is a doc film. This is going to be good.
And I think it was all the better because we'd gone through Terminator and Mulan. I earned the right to watch this.
Absolutely. Yes, we earned it big time. So it's time for a synopsis. Let's jump right into it.
Okay. Synopsis is impossible, but because this is not a plot heavy film. This is an ideas film, but let's have a crack at the plot. The setup is there's a young man and a young woman, and they're driving to meet his parents for the first. She's going to meet his parents for the first time, and she's thinking of ending things. She reveals, so meaning in this case, thinking of ending the relationship and
not suicide, which is how I read it at first. It's I'm thinking of ending the relationship. That's right.
Yes, yeah, I read it as suicide first. Second as ending the relationship, and third, who knows?
Right.
But then they take this long journey in the car, her thinking of ending things, kind of, you can tell, wanting to break it off, but having to go through with this because he's excited about introducing her to his parents. That's the first act, I suppose. Then they arrive at the parents' house, and there's the parents are played by Toni, Collette, and David Thewlis, and it gets all wacky. In one respect, it's a pretty conventional meeting of the parents with awkward moments and that sort of thing, but it soon veers off into crazy territory where he really starts playing with form and playing with everything.
It just gets
really
out of control, right? The film goes batshit crazy at that point. And it just happens with big twisting, turning movements, and suddenly you don't know where you are anymore. You know, you're just like, wait a second, what is this film? It's quite incredible.
What is this film? And then just plot-wise, I suppose, then they eventually get out of that time bubble. All along, she's been telling him, I need to get home tomorrow. You know, I've got to get up in the morning for various different reasons. Eventually, they leave. Long car drive home. They stop at an ice cream parlor, Tulsi Town
ice cream or something.
Yeah, it's like a Dairy Queen. They get a couple of slushies and end up in this school where, I'm getting lost. where they meet up with a janitor who has been kind of a subplot all the way through. This janitor who it's pretty clear is either a double for or is Jake,
which is going to be
she's wanting to break up with.
I know, and it's going to be great to get into the details of that because I think that's the sort of linchpin that holds this whole film together. Is like, who is this janitor? How is he related to Jake? Are they the same person? Are they whatever? You know, like that's there are a lot of interpretations that you can have around how this whole thing fits together. And getting lost in the story is like the name of the game.
Yeah, but like I just stumbled through a synopsis there and going through plot points. But the reason I like this film, and I'm going to say I like it very much, is because I'm not a plot guy. I just like all this playing with stuff and all this meta business, and you know you never quite know who everyone is and how they relate and whose perspective and that sort of thing. So that's really what this film's about to me, rather than the narrative.
You know, you get a real sense that Kaufman he's making a lot of statements about life in this film and about the personalities that you see in there and how they relate to each other. So you can actually kind of forget the plot on some level and just sink yourself into that stuff. Like, that's all really meaty and great in itself.
Are you a Kaufman fan?
I am, in general. I haven't seen Synecdoche. I never know if I'm saying that right, but I have seen the others. I'm saying the others. I've seen Anomalisa, Eternal Sunshine, Being John Malkovich, Adaptation, and I've enjoyed all of those films a lot. I haven't sort of gotten to the level of like wanting to rewatch them many times as some of my friends do. So I'm in the middle.
I love everything that he's done. Like, love it very much, I think. But still, for some reason, I've never got to the point of being like fanboying about him and like you say, watching them several times. They're kind of... I watch every one of them I've seen once, simply loved it and almost not wanted to spoil it again or something. I love the memory of it and I don't go back, but I would like to go back to some of them now.
And this film is another one of those. It's another one of those films that you experience once fresh and you will never be able to experience it that way again. Although I do hear that rewatching it brings all sorts of new pleasures because some of the little connective pieces start to make more sense and they pop out at you on second and third viewing. So I can understand that too.
Yeah, it would have to.
So I think we should go back to the beginning and let's just talk it through in order because there's so much for each little sequence of this film to discuss that I'm just curious to see what you think about it all. And like starting off with the uber long drive into the parents' house. What was your take on that?
I absolutely loved it. I knew something was up very early, I think. Like I think one of the first clues was when she says, or when she thinks or narrates, I'm thinking of ending things, and he goes, what? So right then I kind of thought, okay, she's in his imagination, or she's kind of like the others, or the one, or the Sixth Sense.
Cool take right from the start. Yeah, I like that.
So
you picked up straight away that she might be in his imagination, because that's a perceptive leap to make right off the get-go.
Yes, definitely. Yeah,
wow.
I thought I didn't know what direction that was going to play out, but I thought that made no sense. Like, he clearly heard her, so I thought, no, that voice is actually in his head, not hers. That
whole sequence is a really great just an indicator of what's to come. But then a few moments later, they pass an old burnt down house, and there's a brand new swing set out the front. At that moment, I'm racking my brains to figure out, like, what does the swing set mean? What does it mean? Did you have a take on that? No, I didn't get it. I was just like, what is this?
Oh, no, I definitely have a take.
Oh, please tell me.
The whole film is an amalgam of his, be it life experiences merged with fantasies, and it's all blurring. Like, they talk about time quite a bit, and time's just all over the shop, and everything's happening at once. Like, at one time in his life, he was there early on when that swing set was new, and he was also there when the house was, was it burnt down or just a shambles? Or
you're a genius, Doc. So I think that makes total sense. We're getting into almost the meaning of the film already, but that's cool, right? But I didn't put together the whole, like, this is the janitor's, or this is Jake's life, right? From beginning to end, and all of his weird mishmashed memories all sort of put together until the end of the film. Like, it took me the whole film to kind of take that journey. So I think that's cool.
But there were a lot of clues on that, though, weren't there? Like, maybe not, when I said I virtually claimed to have worked it out at the start, that's not true. I just knew something was up. All through, you've got that janitor figure, and the comparisons between the janitor and Jake.
And I definitely picked up that those two people were the same character quite early on. I don't know, there was something about that felt like it was a signpost. But then there were other things that were really shiny, like that swing set, that I just couldn't figure out.
I think that's the time element. If you claim, like I would claim, that she, what do we call her? Was it Lucy at some stage?
Yeah, we got Lucy, and once she was called Amy or Ames, and she's listed in IMDb just as young woman, which is interesting.
Okay. Yeah. If we assume she is a figment of his imagination or a merging of several people over time, I think that gels with his life almost flashing before his eyes.
I figured out that we were flashing through, memories, at least of his parents. I did not get at all that Lucy was a figment of his imagination, but I have since read a Kaufman interview and he has said as much. So I know that's legit, right? You've nailed that. I didn't pick it up. And there's a lot in this film that just, I enjoyed the whole thing, but I felt like it was a little, like I was trying to keep up. Like I just wasn't smart enough to absorb it in the moment,
But that's the beauty, isn't it? Because like it's impossible to understand at the moment. I felt that all through you're trying to grasp at clues, and there were so many clues and so many, when you think you've got it, he'll insert some other little red herring that makes you have to put the whole film on its side again to try and understand it. You could call that pretentious, and it is, I guess, to a lot of people, because it excludes a lot of people who perhaps don't get the language of film, or
or they can't be bothered going on that ride. Like they don't want to think that hard,
or can't be bothered.
That's right.
But I just enjoy the fact that there's so many levels of meaning that you can explore it and keep finding something.
I think what elevates it above just being kind of intellectual and tricksy and these sorts of things, and kind of pulling one over our eyes and all that stuff, is that he's kind of very carefully not over-explaining anything at any point, and he's very carefully doing it in a sort of human way that you can just watch it and just enjoy at the same time. And I don't think he's looking down, over his nose at you, sort of saying like, well, try and figure this one out. I think I don't get that feeling from it,
And he's giving you a real story at the same time, isn't he?
Yeah.
So you can sort of follow the story. Like,
it's very human. Totally.
And I think that's the beauty, like her character especially. Like if you look at just the facts of the case, this is a male director talking about a male character, and the woman is indistinct, always changing, could be any woman because they're all the same, figment of his imagination. That sounds awful. That's kind of what it is. But her, what's her name? Jessie
Buckley.
Jessie Buckley, her character and probably more so her performance are so good, I think, that she really is like a real person, and she's not just a figment of his imagination. She's a real character trapped in someone else's story.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You get the feeling that he's become this old guy who's watched, as a janitor, he's watched like lots of talented young girls pass through this high school, and then he's imagined what they've gone on to become. And he's lived a life without love by the sounds of it. And what he's built in his head is his perfect woman. And she's an intellectual, and she's a poet, and she's an artist, and she can have these conversations with him that he's always wanted to have about the arts. So I think, I think you're right. It's like, if you're going to tell a story about a guy that's imagined his perfect woman, this is a pretty sophisticated and cool way to do it.
So let's move to the when they arrive at the farmhouse.
Yeah.
What did you? It's like a completely different film that we go into. What's your take on that?
Well, that's right, because it starts off as almost like a relationship drama that's like really dialogue heavy in the car. Then they get to the farmhouse and it's immediately like creepy as hell. The whole thing, the building's creepy. It's actually screaming horror film in a lot of ways. And that whole thing where they get out of the car and they're waving up at his mum, and she just keeps waving, and they just keep waving. Like, straight away. No, but they don't go in. Something's wrong here, right? This place is weird. Yeah. And then the next thing you know is they're off in the little barn around the back or around the side where the animals are kept. And Jake tells this horrific story about how the pigs were sort of left for too long and they weren't moving and the parents were just throwing food in. And then they discovered that actually the reason the pigs weren't moving is because they were being eaten alive by maggots. Full on. And everything after that just gets progressively weirder and more disturbing. There's the dog that just keeps shaking nonstop for some reason. There's the basement that then doesn't get explored for ages and you're just wondering what the hell's with the basement.
I know, so cool.
And then there's the whole Get Out style parents that are just, there's something really off with these two people, but you can't figure out what it is.
And there's little things throughout it, little skips in audio, and it's like aren't there little almost like glitches in the Matrix? Something just doesn't look quite the same. Her hair looks a bit different.
Yes. Suddenly one of the dad's older or younger, Yeah, and or they repeat a word or a phrase sort of uncomfortably, and everything that they have different. She has different professions. Everything just gets turned on its head. She sees herself in the photo. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's the photo of the red-haired kid, and they both so Lucy and Jake are like pretty sure that's them as a child. So little details like that. I think this section of the film was the bit that was the most coherent and came the most alive for me. Like I just loved the whole thing inside the house. I enjoyed the drive to the house. It felt a tad long for me. I was just like waiting, getting a little bit uncomfortable. And then after the house, they do another long drive and that felt a little bit uncomfortable. But this house bit right in the middle, I just loved everything about it. I was sold 100%. And everything that happened made me slightly more uncomfortable. And you know how I like that sort of stuff. Like I got off on it. I thought it was great.
It was wonderful, that sequence, and very accessible and easy to watch. And the performances were killer.
So good.
Like Toni Collette, I don't always buy into her. Like I usually do, but not always. Yeah. And she gave this, is it United States of Tara? Is that her?
Yeah, that's her.
When she's playing different things, it really reminded me of that, but even better than that.
Yeah, it was like that and meets Hereditary. You got this sort of this horror setup, but her playing it. She's a little goofy and a little like her mind's sort of gone. Yeah. And now when you get later in the film and you realize what's going on, the performances of the parents start to make more sense. Like these are his memories of his parents, and they are kind of caricatures of themselves. They're saying ridiculous stuff that's embarrassing for him, Yeah. And that's all heightened to the nth degree in his memories.
And they're all blurred.
And just the way you remember your parents, like from your childhood, almost like a dream. 1 second where they're 50, the next second they're 35, and it's just we're just jumping back and forth.
And you remember like the dog, that clip of him just shaking the water off, that just gets repeated like it is like a glitch and just like this fragment of a memory that's all he can recall from it.
So weird. It's almost like that's all he remembers of that dog. Like maybe he was really young when they had that dog. Those sorts of details, when you think back on the film after you've watched it, are really, really fun. So one thing that's a real theme in this is that 1 second Lucy's a poet, then she's an amazing artist, and she's got all these photos on her phone of her art. Then she's recalling books and reviews word for word. What was your take on that? And while you were watching in the house and you started to see all the clues of the things she was talking about, how'd you feel about that?
Well, I loved it. Some things I kind of picked up in the moment, and others took a long time. But it goes to the intertextuality of the whole film, and it being in some respects built on a whole lot of influences from his own life. Like she's basically made up only of thoughts and other people's perceptions of Robert Zemeckis films, David Foster Wallace's writing, like reviews of films, Oklahoma. He's invented all of this, and that might be a decent time to talk about The Basement.
Yes.
Because The Basement for me is where the truth lies. and that's where really all of the film is revealed, or a lot of the film is revealed to you, isn't it? Like
right.
This is the room of no. I'm probably confusing. Am I confusing the basement with his room?
Well, his room has some clues, but the basement has the paintings that she's just claimed to be her own. And then you see a different artist's name on those exact same paintings. And then later on, there's the washing machine, and it's got all of the janitor's tops in it, which is a real, that's a real kind of giveaway of what's going on in case you missed it.
Yeah. But I think we now know that this is this old man janitor's house.
Yes.
And his memories swimming around in it. And you get all the clues as to all his influences in life. And then you realize that the whole bloody story can be built using all these clues that we see in his room and in the basement.
You just mentioned before Robert Zemeckis, and the little sudden flashback scene of a different young couple, sort of meeting and falling in love. And then suddenly that ends and you've got credits and it says directed by Robert Zemeckis. Oh my God, that was so genius. I just lost beautiful. It. I lost it. Perfect. Pitch perfect. I couldn't believe it. Robert Zemeckis. That is so good. Oh my God. I lost it. I think Edith was like, what the hell's going on? It was just perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah, I squealed or did something like
exactly
I was visibly moved at the time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the only time. Did you have any other moments like that?
That was probably the main one. Like that was the one that just made me just so delighted by that whole little segment. Perfect.
Yeah.
I think the other moment, one of the moments that really got to me came later in the film. And that was the big dumpster full of the sort of slushy ice creams.
Oh, I loved it. Yes.
It was just like a perfect detail to drop right at that moment.
Yeah. And that was one of those moments, that little reveal that turned the whole universe on its head again.
Yes.
Didn't it?
Yep.
And I'm not sure I've completely untangled that one, but it took my mind in a lot of directions.
Well, okay, so before we get to that, let's go. We've left the house now, right? So they finally...
Let's not leave the house yet. I've got one favorite moment in the house that I just want to mention, and it goes to the beauty of this isn't the editing, I don't know what you'd call it, the camera work, the technical craft of the film.
Yeah.
When they're sitting on the couch and the camera moves towards the record player before the characters make the decision to get up and play some music. So it was...
okay.
It's just... I think I paused and rewound and watched it again.
Oh, wow.
It was so awesome. Beautiful. It read to me at the time like fate, that they're going there, and then the world knows that they're going there, the universe knows that they're going there, but they don't even know yet.
Oh, I love that.
And a million other possible interpretations, but I just loved it.
So good. Yeah, there are some masterful choices of camera work and editing in that whole part of the film, particularly in the house, because it does have that element of the time shifting and moving, and the way he told and unraveled and revealed that story was done beautifully. Great directing, and for a guy who's known as a writer foremost, he's becoming a great director as well.
Well, he's learnt from some of the best, hasn't he?
Yeah, surely. That's right. Yeah. So I was saying, shall we move to the next bit, which is
permission
the second
to move on.
Okay, great. The second long drive. And now this one, I actually got a little, I'm not going to say bored. That's not the right words, because it wasn't boring, but I was a little bit exasperated with it. Just a little bit like, oh, we're back in the car. I was enjoying the house so much. Yeah. And why are we taking so long to get to the whatever's next? There was a bit of that for me, even though there was one thing I loved, but I'll ask you first. What did you like or dislike about that part of the film?
One part of me agrees with you. Like the house part of the film was so strong and so vivid, and it really just drew you in, and I think it would have drawn anyone in. And then you go back to this drawn out intellectual talkathon in the car, and it was a little hard, but I loved his writing and I loved everything he was trying to do with it. So like I stayed with it and loved it, but I wouldn't hang anyone out to dry if they did.
I struggled a bit with all of the references, the intellectual references. Just because I couldn't personally, I didn't know what most of them were.
No, me either.
And I was just a little bit like, okay, this is getting more into the reality of what his idea of the perfect woman in him would be like. Like they'd probably argue and feel at odds with each other a fair bit. But then Lucy just rolls out this amazing, it's like a review that's been taken from somewhere about Cassavetes, and it's just wonderful. Like that bit was like a highlight in the second car ride that I loved. I loved everything about it. I loved her performance, and I went all the way with it. I didn't understand it at all, but I loved it.
Yeah, me too. Okay, it's the layers that I loved. Like, because it's a real review. It's a verbatim,
Yeah, I figured. And what it said to me was, well, this lady is full on crazy, because I still at this point I couldn't figure out that she was a figment of his imagination. I was just like, who is this person?
Well, in fairness, she may or may not have been, because like he's playing with us all the time. So there's nothing conclusive to say what she is. So maybe she is a real girl. But it's when you're in your mind, you're thinking Cassavetes, reviewer, her as a character. Is she a character? Like, is she real? There's so many things to have to think of at once. Yeah. But that's cool to me.
And then the film sort of does a really great turn again and redeems itself after that kind of long drive with the ice cream stand or whatever it is, the ice creamery in the middle of freaking nowhere. And I sort of took that as the janitor goes to this ice cream place, and this is what that dumpster full of slushies is later. Right. He goes there every day on his way to work, and these young women that you meet at the ice creamery are the mixture of sort of reactions he receives. There's the shy young girl who sort of treats him nicely, and then there's the two pretty young girls who sort of treat him like the old creepy freak from the high school. So I thought that was really a great little part of the film.
There's no doubt it was a great part of the film, but it's so difficult to unpack. I feel that this part, more than perhaps any, he has packed so many possibilities into it, and I really don't know what's what. There's things like the shy girl has a rash, and Jake, that mirrors a rash on Jake's arm.
Yeah, which he didn't have before, right? He just, in that moment, seems to have a rash.
Yeah, because, he doesn't really exist either, of course. He's just a figment of
his memory.
His older self's imagination, but there's a definite relationship between the two, whether they just understand each other or she is kind of a representation of him as well in some way.
And when you're kind of a lonely dude, right, and you're out to get your ice cream, and you connect over the fact that you both have a rash, like that could be enough to form a lifelong memory. Like that could be all it is.
It's true.
She smiled at him and she also had a rash. Oh, imagine the possibilities.
It's true. But how about the line, which is probably the most intriguing line in the film for me? She says to the girl, "You don't have to go forward in time. You can stay here."
Oh yeah, that was Yeah, you're right. That was that. I'd forgotten about that. That was a real moment.
So it's it works on a few levels. Like it plays into the fact that time is this weird beast, and it has a sense of foreboding that perhaps there is something bad coming.
Yes,
and it can be stopped.
And you know what comes straight after that is a really strong feeling that she's being taken somewhere to be murdered. Like that's what the tone of the film turns to next. So
oh wow, I'm glad you thought that, because I haven't wrapped my head around it yet, but it felt sinister didn't it?
Yeah, it totally did.
And not long after, you see like the scene that you said you loved with all the empty ice cream thingies.
Yeah. Creepy as hell. Yeah.
That felt like, this is the latest in a long string of murders. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Yes, it did. It did.
Yeah.
But then if I'm thinking about it now, it's like the shy girl is saying to Lucy, if you continue on, well, she's actually saying to Jake, I suppose, if you continue on with this memory, the track you're taking, then old Jake is going to meet whatever. Memory Jake's going to meet real Jake. Lucy's going to be stuck in the middle, and it's all going to just die. Like the whole thing, the whole fantasy is going to die. So maybe the feeling of like you're being taken off to be murdered is actually legit. Like that's a real feeling.
Yeah. Like Marty McFly's gonna
right
meet himself.
He's gonna meet himself. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Look, I don't think that's the correct way of viewing it, but you can't be sure, and it's at least worth.
And with Kaufman, you get a feeling that he sort of is okay with people taking away their own interpretations, and like he sort of doesn't want to ruin that. He wants people to go watch it, build their own explanation, and leave with that. And kind of
completely. There was one other sinister thing in that little scene was the smell in the back room, or it's not varnish or it's not polish or something.
That's
she
true.
Said. So like,
what was that?
What was that other than dead bodies in the in the freezer back or something?
Any clues?
I don't know.
So there's a lot of those little details that I just I sort of had to let go because I couldn't focus.
Yeah,
because
your head doesn't fit them in.
I know, you're sitting there going, wait, what? And then before you know it, there's another thing that you have to try and figure out. So we've kind of skipped to the next bit now where the next stop is Jake's old high school. He's calling it his old high school, but actually this is where he's become a janitor as well. And the inevitable kind of meeting of the two Jakes. Although, do they ever really meet, or is it just that Lucy meets old Jake? Like young Jake disappears and Lucy meets old Jake? I can't remember.
Oh, geez, good question. Not entirely sure.
Basically, they pull up the car. Jake gets freaked out that the old janitor's watching them, and he runs off into the high school, dropping the two slushies in the dumpster on the way in. And after a while, she's just so cold and been waiting so long that she gets out of the car and follows him into the high school, which becomes like the final act of the film.
And that's when the film has its third tab of acid, I think.
I think you're right, man. It gets wacky as hell.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of lost me a little bit.
Yeah, I can understand that. And it probably, I don't want to criticize it because I loved it so much, but it wasn't as taut, was it? Like that middle scene at the house was really perfectly to the millimeter constructed.
Yep.
And you could argue that the end was too, but it I don't know.
I think it was well executed, but I wasn't as sold on the vision at the end there. I think I was going with it up until she met the old janitor, and then the dance number kicked off. Like once the dancing started, I just found it really hard to stick with it for a good chunk there.
Well, I suppose that's when it went completely into the abstract, into the world of ideas and symbolism and all this intellectual mumbo jumbo. It's really only working on the intellectual level for those who are smart or stupid enough or pretentious enough to have made it this far.
Right. And I think that the level of my intelligence was revealed at that moment, because I just was like, why are they dancing?
Yeah,
what are we doing here? This just turned into Glee for some reason. Like I couldn't really figure it out. And also whenever I see that in films where suddenly it sort of cuts to a dance number and it's like they're clearly like professional dancers. I don't like it generally. I sort of just go, ugh, why? Ugh. Don't get real dancers in to do the thing. That's gross. That's just me.
Yeah.
But once that bit was done, and I mean, it didn't get any less weird. It got weirder and weirder, right?
It did.
but at least I was sort of able to get past the dances and try to think about what it all meant. What was your take on the dance? I'm curious.
I think it was informative in some ways. So at the start of the dance, you had the two Jessies, the actors' names. So she's found him, and they look at each other in the corridor, and then the dancers appear behind them or something, and it's very clear that the dancers are symbols for them.
Yep.
But that then makes you think that perhaps they're all, both women, both blokes, just symbols for everybody. And this is a little drama play that plays out a million times, like in the Robert Zemeckis film, like in Oklahoma, and again in their story.
I think you nailed it, and I think I was just too bothered by the dancing to be able to see past it, to even be able to put it together.
Well, the dancing then went on a bit, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, but did you like in general? There was a lot of this playing with not genres, but different types of art. To tell the story.
Yeah,
like you do have music and poetry and film reviews and movies, teleplays, whatever it was, and dance and animation.
Yes.
So like there's intertextuality woven into the actual plot line if they all work as part of his imagination for creating this history in this world, but also in just the filmmaking, it's different devices used. Did you like it?
I liked the idea of it for sure. And I think it works. I think it works really, really well. It also works on in terms of the theme of like, here's a guy who's considers himself to be more intellectual than his station in life has sort of allowed him to be, and all of his fantasies are built around that. Like, if I just had this kind of life, if I just had this kind of partner, we would talk about these things. We would go see. We'd do all the arts, and we'd build a life together. And instead, I've been mopping floors my entire life and watching little shit high school kids pass through and make fun of me.
That's a good segue to perhaps the final part of the film. You've got him going into the car. Clearly, I think thinking of ending things by now.
Yeah.
And meeting up with this animated pig
oozing maggots.
Yeah,
that was crazy.
Who says, I wrote down what the pig said.
Oh, good.
One of many things. Everything's the same when you look close enough. As a physicist, you should know that. You, me, ideas, we're all one thing.
Totally. There you go.
So
there you go.
Yeah.
That
as a physicist, you should know that. And that in turn leads to the final kind of scene on the stage.
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
Well, I didn't love it, honestly, but apparently that was like word for word the speech from A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that, but I've since realised.
Yeah, which is interesting. Another little juicy morsel there was that A Beautiful Mind won the Oscar that year that Adaptation was out, and so maybe that was playing on Kaufman's mind a little bit.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, and then he starts singing. So he does the Beautiful Mind speech. He's old, and everybody in the audience is everyone you've seen in the entire film, and they're all really old with the worst possible old people makeup on that you could imagine. So he does the speech, and then he starts singing a song from Oklahoma, right?
I assume so. I don't know Oklahoma. I'm not a musical guy.
I don't really know it either. Yeah, but look, I just thought the ending was a bit weird. It was a bit weird for me.
Well, what did you make of the fact, the fact that he's obviously wearing stage makeup to look older?
Yeah.
Whereas within the confines of the movie, clearly Kaufman has done aging well earlier. So
yes.
This is a device.
It is.
This is meant to be fake age.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
No, look, I think by this point I was reeling from everything that had happened in the whole film, and I didn't know what was going on, honestly. And I was a little bit like thrown by the dancing, and then I was thrown by this weird setup of this sort of Oscars style speech or whatever, Nobel Prize style speech at the end with all the weird aged makeup. Like, I just didn't know what was happening anymore by this point, honestly.
Yeah. It felt like just his like a fantasy, really. Just like a lot of the film is a fantasy. Like I think the girl was a fantasy a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And here's him, with the aged makeup at the end of a successful life, thanking everybody. His mum is in good health on stage. The girl representation is in the audience. Everyone loves him.
Yeah.
And yet the clue to that all being a complete fantasy is the fact that it's presented as a play, and B, that everything about it is derivative to the verbatim, beautiful mind quotes and everything. So
the film has come to a conclusion. The fantasy has come to a conclusion. His life has come to a conclusion because the old Jake is basically, we've just seen him pretty much, you're guessing, die. He's had some sort of stroke or something in his car. And so maybe all this old stage makeup on all of the people, the entire cast of the film, is a way of saying the show's over, folks. Like the fantasy, all of the memories, all of it's coming to an end. And this is the grand finale.
I like it. Whether that's right or wrong, I think that's a poetic way to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final shot of the film is the pickup truck covered in snow, which is just a beautiful ending image. And that
is it the pickup truck covered in snow?
That's what I took it to be. I took it to be the old janitor's pickup truck. Like that was the final thing to say he did die. It happened.
My memory isn't going to serve me right, but my recollection is that was a mystery because I thought it was the other car.
Oh, interesting.
And not the pickup
there you
truck.
Go. So, there you go.
I don't know how to interpret that if that's the case, but that's what I thought it was.
Kind of like it either way. It's poetic either way. Well, we have talked for a long time about the film because there was so much in there, right? So let's do some remind me ofs.
Okay, let's do some quick fire ones. Who's starting?
Well, I'm going to start with an obvious one for me, just in terms of the Jessie Piemons. Is that even how you say his name? The guy who plays Jake. Anyway, he was in Fargo, and this whole thing reminded me of Fargo, the TV show.
The TV show.
Yeah. I think he was in the second season. And he's such an amazing actor, such a great actor. And I really noticed him in that show. And the whole snowy, desolate, weird people in a weird little town vibe is Fargo through and through.
Yeah. I've only seen the first half of the first season of Fargo. I was loving it, so I've got to continue. But
that's great.
Don't think I've seen that much of Jessie.
Yeah.
So, but he really made an impact. He was perfectly cast.
He's a great actor. He's one of those actors, a little bit like Brendan Gleeson or, Brian Cox or any of these guys, right? Who's just, he's a little bit kind of, or Philip Seymour Hoffman,
Don't steal my next thing.
Sorry, dude. Just a little bit, icky and uncomfortable and just, very human and incredibly watchable. Okay. I'm not stealing your thing. What's yours?
I was going to say Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Sorry, dude.
No, it was. And specifically the Kaufman film you haven't seen, Synecdoche, New York.
Ah, brilliant. I have to go and watch that one.
Well, it's an impossible film to explain, and I haven't seen it for a long time, so I only remember it in fragments, but it really is very similar to Thinking of Ending Things in that it's playing with reality. It's like worlds inside worlds, and time is messed up, and parallel universes in a way, but it's very sprawling, and it's even harder to get your hands around. It's almost impossible to understand, I think, from memory.
I've heard this about it. That it's a tough watch, and there's a lot in there.
And I felt that this film was almost the same, but it was just contained enough to make you think, yes, I can understand this if I try. Whereas, so it's almost a better done, a more accessibly done version of Synecdoche for me.
Cool. How amazing that this is a Netflix film.
Ah, it's cool.
How crazy is that? Like the quality of film that we are now getting in our streaming services. And that's not even talking about the quality of TV, but like, which is out of this world as well. But just the fact that you're getting films like this coming through on Netflix that you can pay, you just as part of your subscription. It's wonderful.
And you're getting Ridley Scott doing TV and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Just what's going on?
What is going on? Exactly. It's crazy.
I feel like I'm in a Kaufman
the new
film.
frontier. Yeah, that's right. So
any others?
Yes, I've got a couple others. Get Out. I mentioned it already, but Get Out.
I still haven't seen it.
Was
on my list.
Huge one for me. This for me was like, so Jordan Peele did Get Out, which is the young black man going into a white community that feels really like alien and like everyone's out to get him, right? This is kind of like the white people edition of Get Out, but you've got the liberal, artsy New York kind of girl going out into the boondocks where everyone's weird and don't understand her.
She can't get out.
And she can't get out. And then meanwhile, the whole place just starts going really weird on her. So I had strong vibes of that in that whole house section, which I loved. I loved it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I get what you mean. And I think there'd be others that would do the same.
Back to you. Any others for you?
Back to me. Have you seen the movie Lock? I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before. It's by Stephen
the one in the
Knight.
car, right? With Tom Hardy?
Tom Hardy.
Haven't seen it.
I think I saw it at a festival, and it's in a car. Virtually the whole movie is in a car, and I think it's masterfully done, brilliantly acted, and to be able to carry a whole film with just really one character on the phone in the car, I thought was an achievement. And that just reminded me of the long extended sequences in the car.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's great.
Similarly successful, I think. I know we said that they went a bit long and got a bit tedious, but I think if you stayed with it, it's still...
Yeah, not overly well so. Yeah, totally. The next one I had was Mother. Aronofsky.
I haven't seen Mother yet. I'm dying to.
Dude. I think you will love Mother. It's such a cool film.
Well, I love Aronofsky, so that's a start.
Yeah, absolutely.
I usually love him anyway.
This won't turn you off him in any way. This will just he'll be higher esteem for you after this. I think anyway. Mother's such a great film, but it has that. I think even though Jake's the main character of this film, it is. Like Lucy's your POV, like you're seeing through her eyes, and for all of it really, which is an unusual choice in itself, right? But in Mother, you've got the mother, the female character in a house, and all around her, reality keeps shifting, and you're constantly trying to figure out what's going on. Who is she? What's her relationship to the man that's in the house with her? Who are these strangers that are coming and going? And the house just becomes somehow bigger, and it just becomes more crazy as the story goes on. And this film really reminded me of that a lot, and like just that sort of mental game you're playing, trying to keep up the whole way through as well.
That sounds great. I think that's my next one.
Homework.
Do you have any others?
I've got a little list of ones that I don't want to talk about, but I just want to rattle off at the end. But any that you want to jump into?
Not in great detail, but do you know the Peter Greenaway film? I can never pronounce it. The Baby of Macon, I think it's called.
No,
Macon. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's one of those films, and I love this whenever anybody does it, where the lines between the stage and the audience, or the lines of the fiction are blurred.
Ooh,
so that's, I can't even remember the storyline properly, but I just know, like Birdman, which I think I've mentioned before, and maybe in reference to Black Bear, the nature of artifice versus reality gets blurred.
I haven't even heard of that film. I have to check it out. Cool.
Yeah, I haven't seen it for
do you recommend
100 years.
Yeah.
At the time, it was one of my favorite films. But
oh, wow. Cool.
I'd have to rewatch to know if that's a fair...
That may be my homework. Interesting.
I think it's a struggle, though.
Is it?
You don't want to, it's not just light watching.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, this film you could say the same thing about, but I appreciate it so much for that in some ways as well. So I'll just rattle off my little list. I had Good Will Hunting, just for the janitor that with the intellect that is trapped. Okay. Psycho and Fight Club for that sort of made up personality that sort of those are two, and Shutter Island as another sort of variety of like what's real and what isn't. Those all popped into my head as well.
Yeah, they're all great. Yeah, Fight Club in particular, definitely. Are you looking forward to the next Kaufman film? Or do you need a break?
I think I need a break, but luckily we will get a break, right? Because usually there's a few years between them.
Yeah.
But I always look forward to them. Same with Aronofsky. You know it's not going to be easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah, these are the films I love. So if we can sprinkle a few of these into the show, I'll be happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a long enough episode.
Yeah, totally. And next week, we don't know what we're doing yet. We have to think about that. But there's actually a number of great new films coming out on streaming services. So there's no shortage at the moment. And I think that's awesome.
Fun times to come.
Absolutely. Well, that's another one down, Doc.
You know
Catch
what?
you in the next one.
I'm thinking of ending things with this episode.
Great.
So let's do that.
Beautiful. See you next time.
See ya.